My boss stole my AI breakthrough, then discovered I'd left a hidden trap. So, Vera, that's why we've decided to terminate your employment, effective immediately. Cole Roger leaned back in his Italian leather chair, his smile appearing sympathetic while his eyes remained cold as Arctic ice. We appreciate your contributions to Project Hippocrates, but we need to take it in a different direction. I kept my face carefully neutral, though my heart hammered against my ribs. 3 years of my life, countless sleepless nights, a groundbreaking medical AI system that could diagnose rare conditions with 97.8% accuracy, a system I had built from the ground up. And the proprietary algorithms, I asked evenly. The diagnostic frameworks I developed. Cole's smile widened, revealing 2 white teeth. As per your employment contract, all intellectual property belongs to NeuroHealth. We'll be moving forward with the final integration phase without you. Without me. Of course. Now that my AI system, my baby, was nearly complete, ready to revolutionize medical diagnostics, I was suddenly expendable. I see, I said simply. Security will escort you to clear your desk. Cole continued, clearly relieved I wasn't making a scene. Your personal items will be sent to you after they've been vetted for company property. He stood, extending his hand as if we'd just concluded an amicable business meeting. I ignored it, gathering my tablet and standing. 3 years, I said softly, and this is how it ends. Business is business, Vera. Cole shrugged. No hard feelings. No, I agreed, meeting his gaze directly. No feelings at all. As security walked me out, I felt strangely calm. Maybe because I'd seen this coming 6 months ago, when Cole had started asking unusually detailed questions about my work. Or maybe when he'd begun bringing potential investors through the lab, introducing them to our breakthrough technology without mentioning my name. Or perhaps it was because I knew something Cole didn't. Project Hippocrates had a guardian angel built into its core architecture, and that angel answered only to me. I walked through the glass doors of NeuroHealth for what seemed like the last time, turned to look at the gleaming 30-story building, and allowed myself a small smile. Cole Roger thought he'd won, but the game was just beginning. My name is Vera Clark, 34, formerly the lead AI architect at NeuroHealth Technologies. 3 years ago, I left a cushy job at Google to join this promising biotech startup, lured by the potential to create something that could actually save lives. Project Hippocrates was my brainchild, an AI diagnostic system that could identify patterns across imaging, lab results, genetic data, and clinical observations that human doctors might miss. Unlike other medical AIs that focused on single data types or specific diseases, Hippocrates was designed to be comprehensive, adaptive, and transparent, explaining its diagnostic reasoning in ways human medical professionals could understand and verify. It wasn't just clever code, it was a breakthrough. Cole Roger, the CEO who had personally recruited me, had initially given me free rein. Change the world, Vera, he'd said during my interview, green eyes alight with what I mistook for shared idealism. We'll give you the resources you need. And for 2 years, that seemed true. I built a small but brilliant team, secured the data partnerships we needed, and made remarkable progress. Hippocrates was demonstrating capabilities that exceeded even my optimistic projections. Then things changed. Subtle shifts at first. Cole began requiring more frequent progress reports, asking for simplified explanations of the architecture that seemed aimed at someone else's understanding, not his own. He started bringing investors through without advance notice, having me demonstrate capabilities we'd agreed were still in confidential development. The red flag came 6 months ago, when I discovered Cole had requested server access logs for the system's core architecture access he had no technical reason to need. The next day, I found evidence someone had attempted to create a duplicate repository of my source code. That's when I created Athena's Shield, a buried subsystem within Hippocrates that monitored access, authenticated users based on behavioral patterns, and quietly documented every interaction with the system's core architecture. If anyone attempted to copy, modify, or claim ownership of critical components without proper authorization, Athena would know, and more importantly, would preserve irrefutable evidence. I told no one about this safeguard, not even my closest team members. It wasn't about paranoia, it was about protection. I'd seen too many brilliant women in tech have their work appropriated by men with more power and less ethics. Now, sitting in my apartment the evening after my termination, I opened my personal laptop and accessed a secure server that had nothing to do with Neura Health. Within moments, Athena's logs appeared on my screen, including comprehensive documentation of Cole's activities from the past 3 months. Screen recordings showed him attempting to understand my architectural diagrams, copying key documentation, and most damningly practicing presentations where he explained his breakthroughs to potential investors. "Oh, Cole," I murmured, watching him rehearse explanations of concepts he clearly didn't fully grasp. "You should have paid more attention in those technical briefings." My phone rang. Dana Williams, my former deputy on the project and one of the few people at NeuraHealth I genuinely trusted. "Vera," she whispered when I answered, "it's a nightmare here. Cole announced he's taking over Hippocrates personally, but none of us can make sense of the integration pathways. The system keeps rejecting authentication attempts." I suppressed a smile. "That sounds challenging." "Challenging." "It's impossible." Cole promised the board a demo for Johns Hopkins next week. "But at this rate, we won't have anything functioning to show them." She paused. "This isn't right. Vera, everyone knows this is your work. Word is Cole's planning to publish a white paper with just his name on it." "That would be unfortunate," I said mildly. "Unfortunate, it's theft, academic and intellectual theft." Dana's voice rose, then dropped again. "Sorry, I'm calling from the bathroom. I needed you to know." "I appreciate that. Dana, give it a couple of days. I suspect things will get interesting." "What does that mean, Vera? What did you do?" "Nothing illegal, if that's what you're asking, just insurance. Keep me posted, would you?" After hanging up, I opened my email and composed a message to NeuraHealth's board of directors, requesting an urgent meeting regarding critical security vulnerabilities in Project Hippocrates that pose significant legal and reputational risks to the company. I attached a small sample of Athena's logs, just enough to prove I had documentation without showing my full hand. Within an hour, I received a response from the board chair, Margaret Chen. "Meeting arranged for tomorrow, 9 a.m. Private boardroom entrance to avoid disruption." I closed my laptop, made myself a cup of tea, and slept better than I had in months. The next morning, I arrived at NeuraHealth's headquarters wearing my most commanding outfit, a charcoal suit. Minimal jewelry, hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. Power dressing wasn't about vanity, it was psychological armor for the battle ahead. The security guard at the private entrance looked surprised to see me but checked his tablet and nodded. "They're waiting for you, Dr. Clark." The boardroom was silent when I entered. 8 people sat around the massive oak table, 6 board members, the company's chief legal officer, and Cole, whose face flushed with anger when he saw me. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, half rising from his seat. "She has no business being here after her termination." Margaret Chen, the board chair and a formidable venture capitalist in her 60s, raised a hand. "You'll have your turn, Cole. Dr. Clark has raised concerns that require our immediate attention." "Whatever she's claiming, it's nonsense," Cole snapped, probably just bitter about being let go. "Actually," I said calmly, connecting my laptop to the room's projection system, "I'm not bitter at all. I'm simply concerned about proper attribution of intellectual property and the technical integrity of Project Hippocrates." The room darkened as the projection system came to life. I began by displaying the timeline of the project's development, my initial proposals, milestone achievements, and key innovations, all clearly documented with dates and timestamps. As you can see, Project Hippocrates has been my primary focus for nearly 3 years. What you may not know is that the system's core architecture includes a sophisticated security protocol I developed called Athena's Shield. Cole scoffed. "There is no such component in our system. I've reviewed all the architecture personally." "That's exactly the point, Mr. Roger," I replied, clicking to the next slide. Athena was designed to be invisible to anyone attempting unauthorized access or appropriation. The screen displayed the first of many logs timestamped videos showing Cole accessing my private development servers, copying files, and practicing presentations where he claimed sole credit for breakthroughs he hadn't created. What you're seeing, I continued over Cole's sputtered objections, is comprehensive documentation of attempts to misappropriate my intellectual property. Note the timestamps, access logs, and biometric confirmation. Cole's face had progressed from red to nearly purple. This is a violation of company security protocols. Actually, the chief legal officer interjected, looking ashen. If these logs are authentic, the violation appears to be on your side, Cole. Of course they're not authentic, Cole shouted. She's clearly fabricated this evidence after being terminated. I smiled thinly. That would be quite impressive, considering Athena's logs are cryptographically signed and timestamped using blockchain protocols. They can be independently verified by any digital forensics expert. Margaret Chen studied me with new interest. What exactly are you seeking here? Dr. Clark reinstatement. I shook my head. No. I'm seeking three things first. Proper attribution as the lead creator of Project Hippocrates in all publications, patents, and marketing materials. Second, a revised compensation package that reflects the true value of my contribution. I'm thinking 5% equity and appropriate back pay. And third, a seat on the technical advisory board to ensure the system is implemented ethically. Preposterous! Cole slammed his hand on the table. The system belongs to NeuroHealth, period. Your contract is crystal clear. My contract, I agreed, which I followed to the letter. Nothing in that contract, however, prohibits me from building security protocols to prevent intellectual property theft even from within the company. I clicked to my final slide, a simple terminal window with a countdown timer showing 72 hours. What is this? One of the board members asked nervously. This is how long you have before Hippocrates enters permanent lockdown mode, I explained. The system has detected unauthorized attempts to modify its core attribution frameworks. Without proper authentication, which only I can provide, it will permanently encrypt critical components of its architecture in 72 hours. The room erupted in outraged questions. I waited calmly until Margaret raised her hand for silence. Is this some kind of ransomware? Dr. Clark, she asked, her voice dangerously quiet. Not at all. Ransomware is malicious and illegal. This is simply a security measure to protect intellectual property from theft, similar to how software companies use activation keys. The system is protecting itself from unauthorized modification or misattribution. She's bluffing, Cole declared, but his voice wavered. Our technical team can bypass whatever amateur lock she's put in place. I smiled. Feel free to try. But consider this, I designed the entire system. Do you really think I wouldn't anticipate every bypass attempt? Each failed attempt actually accelerates the countdown. By the way, the chief legal officer leaned over to whisper something to Margaret, who nodded gravely. Dr. Clark, could we speak privately? Margaret asked. Perhaps with just myself and legal counsel. Of course, I agreed, disconnecting my laptop. I'll wait outside. As I left, I caught Cole's murderous glare. I'd just derailed his attempted heist of 3 years' worth of my work, and he knew it. The next hour passed slowly as I waited in a small conference room, sipping mediocre coffee and reviewing my leverage. I was taking a calculated risk, while Athena's shield was real, and the logs genuine. The permanent lockdown was somewhat exaggerated. The system wouldn't actually destroy itself, but it would become significantly harder to modify without my cooperation. Sometimes perception was as powerful as reality. Finally, the door opened and Margaret entered alone. That was quite a presentation, she said, taking a seat across from me. Thank you. Cole is still insisting you've fabricated everything and that we should pursue legal action against you. I nodded calmly. That's his prerogative. I'm confident in the evidence. Margaret studied me for a long moment. Between us. Dr. Clark, could you have built in such safeguards without anyone noticing? With all due respect, Ms. Chen, the fact that you're asking that question instead of dismissing it outright suggests you already know the answer. She smiled slightly. Fair enough. Here's where we stand. The board is concerned about the implications of Cole's actions. Assuming your evidence holds up, we're equally concerned about the future of Project Hippocrates, which represents a significant investment. I understand. I'm not looking to damage the company or the project, quite the opposite. I want Hippocrates to succeed and help patients around the world. That's always been my goal. Then perhaps we can reach an agreement. Margaret slid a tablet across the table. This is our counteroffer. I read it carefully. Co-creator status on all publications and patents. 3% equity, not the 5 I'd requested, but substantial nonetheless. Retroactive compensation for unpaid overtime. And a seat on the newly formed Ethics and Oversight Committee, though not the main board. And Cole, I asked. The board has called for an independent investigation into his conduct. Pending the results, he'll be on administrative leave. It wasn't everything I'd asked for, but it was fair, and more importantly, it protected the integrity of my work. I can accept these terms, I said. With one addition, Dana Williams is promoted to technical director with appropriate compensation. She's brilliant, ethical, and knows the system almost as well as I do. Margaret considered this, then nodded. I believe that can be arranged. Then we have a deal. I extended my hand. As we shook on it, Margaret held my gaze. You know, Dr. Clark, I'm curious. What made you suspect Cole might try something like this? I thought about the countless tech meetings where my ideas had been ignored until repeated by male colleagues, the conference panels where I was mistaken for an assistant rather than a speaker, the subtle and not-so-subtle ways women in tech were still underestimated. Let's just say I've learned to plan ahead, I replied. Now, shall we go save Project Hippocrates? In the weeks that followed, NeuroHealth underwent a seismic shift. Cole's administrative leave became permanent after forensic IT experts confirmed the authenticity of Athena's logs and discovered additional evidence of his planned intellectual property theft. The press release cited his departure as pursuing other opportunities. But industry insiders knew better. I returned to the Hippocrates team not as an employee, but as a specialized consultant with equity, stake, and decision-making authority. The team welcomed me back with a mixture of relief and newfound respect, especially when they learned how thoroughly I'd outmaneuvered Cole. So Athena was watching the whole time, Dana asked as we worked late one evening, preparing for our first major hospital system deployment. Like an actual guardian goddess. More like a very meticulous record keeper, I explained. I designed her to document access patterns, capture screen recordings of suspicious activities, and preserve evidence that couldn't be altered. Remind me never to get on your bad side, she laughed, shaking her head. You really played the long game. I prefer to think of it as thorough contingency planning. The Johns Hopkins demonstration, the one Cole had been so worried about, went forward under my direction and exceeded expectations. When the lead neurologist asked how the system had identified a rare vascular anomaly that 3 human specialists had missed, I was able to explain the precise pattern recognition algorithms at work. The system doesn't replace clinical judgment, I told the impressed medical team. It's designed to be a partner highlighting connections humans might miss while explaining its reasoning and ways you can verify. True transparency is essential for trust in medical AI. 3 months after my dramatic boardroom showdown, Project Hippocrates, now officially called the Clark NeuroHealth Diagnostic Intelligence System, in all publications and marketing materials, was successfully deployed in its first 3 major teaching hospitals. The Wall Street Journal ran a feature on the system, including a profile that described me as the architect who protected her creation with the same brilliance used to build it. The article mentioned Cole only briefly, noting he had been unable to secure funding for new ventures following his departure from NeuroHealth amid intellectual property concerns. I kept the article framed in my new office, not out of vindictiveness, but as a reminder that preparation and evidence would always be my best allies in an industry where women's contributions were still too often minimized or appropriated. 6 months in, the Ethics and Oversight Committee I now co-chaired was ensuring the system was being deployed responsibly, with careful attention to potential biases and with appropriate human oversight. My equity stake had increased in value as NeuroHealth's reputation for both innovation and integrity grew. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, Margaret Chen stopped by my office. We've been approached about acquisition offers, she said without preamble. 3 major tech companies and 2 healthcare giants are interested. And I set down the diagnostic report I'd been reviewing. And the board wants your input before we entertain any serious discussions. Your state gives you a voice. Of course. But beyond that, no one understands what this system can become better than you do. I smiled, remembering how different this conversation would have been under Cole's leadership. I'll review the proposals, I promised. But they should know my priorities haven't changed: ethical implementation, proper attribution for the team's work, and maintaining the system's integrity. Margaret nodded. I expected nothing less. She turned to leave, then paused. By the way, I heard an interesting rumor about Cole last week. Oh, apparently, he's been approaching investors with a revolutionary new concept in medical AI, something he calls Asclepius after the Greek god of medicine. I couldn't help but laugh. How unoriginal. Indeed, strangely. He's having trouble finding backers. Word is that technical due diligence keeps uncovering significant gaps in his understanding of the architecture he's proposing. After Margaret left, I turned to my window overlooking the Boston skyline, feeling a complex mix of vindication and determination. Cole's attempt to steal my work had failed, but more importantly, the system I'd created was already helping diagnose conditions that might otherwise have been missed or caught too late. That evening, I met my former Google colleague Priya for drinks to celebrate the system's successful 6-month deployment milestone. I saw Cole Roger at a tech conference last month, she mentioned as we settled into a corner booth. He was trying to pitch some medical AI concept to anyone who would listen. No takers, from what I heard. Karma, I said, raising my glass in a mock toast. What I still don't understand, Priya continued, is how you managed to build in such comprehensive safeguards without anyone noticing. Weren't there code reviews, system audits? Of course. I nodded. But remember, I designed the entire architecture. When you build something from the ground up, you understand its secrets in ways no one else can. Still, it was risky. What if Cole had discovered Athena before making his move? I shrugged. Then Athena would have remained dormant, simply logging access patterns with no intervention needed. The beauty of good defensive design is that it only activates when necessary. Priya studied me over the rim of her cocktail glass. You're a little terrifying. You know that. I prefer prepared, I corrected with a smile. Later that night, I checked in on the system remotely, reviewing the day's diagnostic data from all 3 hospital sites. The pattern recognition was improving as expected, learning from each case while maintaining the transparency that made it trustworthy to clinicians. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Former NeuroHealth CEO Cole Roger facing SEC investigation over alleged investor misrepresentations. I skimmed the article apparently. Cole had been claiming ownership of AI innovations he couldn't actually deliver, and one too many burned investors had filed complaints. I set down my phone, feeling not triumph, but a quiet certainty that justice sometimes worked itself out. Cole's downfall wasn't my doing, at least not directly. His own dishonesty and overreach had caught up with him, as it often did with men who believed their power exempted them from consequences. A year after my confrontation in the boardroom, I stood on stage at the World Medical Innovation Forum, explaining how the Clark NeuroHealth system had helped identify an emerging pattern of adverse reactions to a common medication combination, potentially saving thousands from dangerous side effects. A young female engineer approached me afterward, clipboard clutched nervously in her hands. Dr. Clark, your work is incredible, she said. I'm developing an AI system for predicting treatment responses in autoimmune conditions, and I wondered, how do you protect your work in an industry where women's contributions are so often, well, appropriated? I finished for her. First, document everything, every idea, every milestone, with timestamps and witnesses when possible. Second, build a network of allies who will speak up for your contributions. And third, I smiled, thinking of Athena silently watching over Hippocrates, invisible but ever vigilant. Third, design systems too brilliant to steal without your expertise to make them work. In technology, the best protection is often being indispensable to your own creation. She nodded earnestly, scribbling notes. But most importantly, I added, don't let the Cole Rogers of the world make you doubt your capabilities or right to recognition. The best revenge isn't just succeeding, it's succeeding so definitively that no one can rewrite the history of your achievements. As the young engineer walked away with renewed determination in her step, I felt the circular nature of progress, how one woman standing her ground could empower another to do the same, slowly shifting the landscape, one brilliant mind at a time. That night, I added a new feature to Athena's Shield, an expanded tutorial module explaining the system's ethical guardrails, attribution frameworks, and security protocols. I named it Passing the Torch and embedded it deep in the architecture, accessible only to those with the right credentials and intent. Someday, another brilliant woman might need to understand how I'd protected my work. When that day came, Athena would be ready to share her secrets one guardian to another. In the ongoing battle for recognition in a world still learning that genius has no gender,